Okay, so today we want to look at how to use arrays that will write text into a browser, and that this text changes over time. And we're going to look at this three different ways. We're going to do it through a sequence, writing through a sequence of a bunch of different text items, like 12, and then we're going to work with it randomly, and then we're going to use text over video. And so we'll check out a couple other fun, useful elements along the way. So this is where we're headed to, and this is Samantha's super awesome SOT poem. And what I want you to see here is this line of text. Elton John wants to meet Ted Cruz, his younger self, the Koch brothers, to change his attitude towards gays. So we can see that every 2 seconds or so this is changing. And let's see how, this is the first thing that we're going to learn how to do. So we're going to go to Sublime, and we're going to start with, and I'm going to provide you all of these text, CSS, the HTML, and the JavaScript. So the key thing here is we're using that span HTML element, and we're giving it an ID. We're just making up any stupid name right here because this is what's going to link the JavaScript to the HTML. And currently it's set to Putin. There could be nothing here, and it will, once the function gets called, it will put the text in there. But for right now, that's like a placeholder. And when that span ends, nothing else will be affected by the JavaScript after. So you can use this anywhere you want. This is an inline element. In other words, it doesn't start a new line when you add it, versus the block level, which does start a new line. Okay, so the CSS, we're not going to mess with any of that. We're going to, and then last thing, towards the end of, right before the body completes, we have a script to a myscripts.js. It's a file that we're working on, a separate file for the JavaScript. Okay, and here it is here. So what I've done is I've taken a bunch of different possible text items and put it into an array. And you know you're working with an array when you have these kind of brackets here like this. And the format for the array is everything, whether it's a audio or a name of an image or a piece of text, also known as strings when you're working with this. It's quotes and then comma, quotes and comma. And then check this out, the very last one you don't use the comma. That's really important. And then it terminates with a semicolon. Okay, so what we need to do when we want to use an array is you need to have a variable that, you don't need to, but it's helpful when you want to use an array that changes over time, is to create a variable for the index number here. So it counts from 0, so Donald Trump is 0, we all know that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So those are the index numbers that you use to work with an array. So I'm going to call this array index. And right now I'm going to just set it to 0. And now what I want to do is create a function that is going to say next word, let's say, we'll call it. I always spell function wrong. And that's really where Sublime is really great. You know something's screwed up when it's not the color that you expect it to be. Okay, and so what we need to do here is we're going to use that trick where we say array index equals array index plus 1. Okay, so anytime this function in next word is called, when the array index, which is 0, array index will equal 0 plus 1. So now the array index equals 1. The next time it's called, array index is 1, and it's 1 plus 1. So now array index is 2. And so this is an example of that global variable idea. These appear before any functions are called are your global variables. And that means that there's a space that's kind of saved for them in the memory of the computer that will hold on to that kind of variables because it's going to change. And in other words, remember this because we're going to add to it or change it in some way, operate some kind of math on it. It needs to be remembered. And so that's what we're doing here, and that's with the global scope. Okay, so now what we've got to do is we want to say this is going to keep going until the end of time if we're calling it every like second or something like that. So what we need to do is tell it to stop and loop back to 0 again. And so what we want to do here is we want to use a conditional statement like we learned about. If array index is greater than, what we want to say here is the number, like whatever the number is here, like 12, we want to say greater than 12. Okay, but there's a cooler way of doing that. When you're working with arrays, there's a property that's built into JavaScript called length. Do you see how that turned blue? That means it's like an official kind of keyword within JavaScript. And what that means is it's going to be whatever the length of this array is going to be this. So it's the text, whatever you call the array, dot, this is called the dot syntax, plus this property, the length. And because we're using the greater than, we want to take, and we're counting from 0 here. So if it's 13 that's in there, it's going to be, if it's greater than 12, whatever the last number is, then make it do something. And that's where we want to say array index equals 0. And this really isn't equals. Equals is this. What this is saying is assign this variable the number 0. Okay, so this is what loops. This loops the array back to 0. Okay. Now what we need to do is plunk this, whatever the array index is, into the HTML document. So to do that, JavaScript is really often using this document object model, which really means that all of these elements of an HTML document are being looked at by JavaScript, and it's kind of looking for what do you want me to mess with, and it's searching through all of the architecture of the page to find this particular thing. And that's called the document object model. And we'll go over that in more detail in our next class. But this document refers to the document that we're working on, this HTML. And then it's going to say get element by ID, which is like a special kind of built-in capability of JavaScript that it's so common that you're going to get that element by ID that they've built it right into the program. And this is where we're going to say special sauce. Okay. And here's something that, some things are made up, and then other things like this dot length and document and get element by ID are not. Here's another one that is not. The thing that the words that you use to write the text into the page, one way of doing it is through this text content. You could also use inner HTML. I'll show you an example of that in a second. And so what we want to do here, that this equals the name of our array, text, bracket, and then what we're going to plunk right in here is this array index. So this is just like saying 0, 1, 2, 22. But it's going to, because we want to take advantage of this code that we've written up here, we want to use the variable. Okay? So now that's going to write the text into the HTML. Sometimes it's helpful to use this console.log to just make sure things are behaving the way that you want to. So let's say if we want to know what is the array index number, this is how you do that. We've done this a bunch of times already, so I just want to use, so you use the operator to add it to this text. I left a space here so it doesn't smush right into that. And then that's going to print out each loop through this function. It'll print out what the array number is here. So we can kind of look to see how our code is operating. It's like a tracer for you to see, is it operating the way you want. Now we just need to call this, you could now have a button that calls next world, or you could use something like the set interval object to call it systematically. Okay, so we're going to say the name of the function that we want it to call, and then how frequently we want it to call. Okay, so let's run this and see how we're doing. We're going to go to here, open the Firefox. Okay, and in 2 seconds, Vladimir Putin should change to, okay, let's see what's going on here. Okay, it looks like something's goofy with that little sequence. Let's take a look and see. I'm not really sure why that was throwing an error, but let's try. Okay. So here's that console log thing I was telling you about. You can take this off and on by using the command option K. Okay, so what is the array index number? It's 8. It's 9. Let's watch it go through the cycle. It's 0. So the length of the array is 10 items, and when it got to 9, don't forget we're counting from 0. So 0 to 9 is 10. And when it gets over 9, send it back to 0. So our thing is working really well here. Okay, so that's an example of cycling through sequentially. You want to go through this sequentially, you do it this way. Now, if you wanted to do it where you're picking a random number in here, we'll do it a slightly different way. So here's a function, we'll call this one random word. We're going to use that same array index. Actually, you know what, we're going to do one step before that. We're going to make up a variable. So we talked about global variables. Here's an example of a throwaway variable. We're not going to make it a global variable. We're not going to say variable z, because this is going to say it's a function, it's a variable that's just going to remain in this function, so we don't need to make it global. And we're going to use this math property that we've seen a bunch of times. So the math object has a property called random that generates a random number between 0 and 1. And we're going to use this trick where we're going to see that text dot length. Whatever the name of your array is, just plunk your array name here, and then it'll take however long the array is, 10 in this case, and multiply it times math.random. Now what we want to do is say the array index equals math.floor. So what this is saying is you need to have these integers, the strict integer. 1.375 is not going to be understood by an array. It needs to be 0, 1, 2, 3. And so what this number here could be 10, could be like 5.376. What mathfloor is going to do is take that number and round it down into an integer. So now we're going to have a rounded down integer with our array index, and we're going to use this same code that we got up here. I'll spare you the having to write that again and plunk it in here. This time I'll use that inner HTML way of writing it in, and we can look at that. So now you can use that set interval again, but this time we're going to call, instead of next word, we'll call random word. And we'll say, let's do it every second this time. Okay, so now if we refresh our browser, it's not going to be in order. And we can see the random numbers that are being generated here. And this approach will work best when you have lots of numbers in your array, when your array is massive. When you have just a few things, you're going to see things repeat with that. But I just wanted you to see how you use both, both ways to do something like this. Okay, so we'll hide that for right now. Last thing I wanted to show you is how to do this with over a video. Okay, so we're gonna look at this. We're gonna just take a quick look at how to do something like this. So here we have text that's playing quickly over a video that we have. And we have this little alpha channel going on with the opacities down low so you can kind of see through the text a little bit. I'll show you how we're doing that. We're also using a different kind of font, a Google font in there as well. Okay, so we'll quickly look at how that's functioning here. Okay, that's not... Okay, here we go. Okay, so we're going to use the same couple things. I think some of the important stuff is within the HTML document here, and I'll give you this as well. What we're doing here is this is the same kind of starting file from the background video file, but I've removed all of the stuff after the very first row. And so I took all that stuff out. So you'll see in your version you would see like lots of other stuff after this section 0. I'm just using section 0. And what I want you to see here is the Z index is set to 4 here, and that the Z index of the video is 3. And this Z index is important when you want one thing to be on top of another with your CSS. You want to use the Z index. And I just put the Z index here of our H1 at 5, so that's going to be the top thing. Here's the name of our font. Here's the little link that I put in from the Google font. And let's take a quick look down here. So here we have the full page ID. This section is the video section here. And then within the video, I have another div that's called layer, and then I have this H1 tag that says it's an ID of text goes here. Okay, so that's what we're going to be replacing. There's no actual text that starts us off in there. It's totally blank. We're going to be putting it in with the JavaScript through this ID. Okay, so it's the same idea. I just wanted you to see the same idea over video. Here's our source. This just means that the scripts are going to be, because I'm in the example folder, I want to go back a folder, and there's a file called MyScripts there. Whoops. Okay. Here's that. So now we're doing the same exact stuff with this text. We're going to set up an array. We're going to cycle through it one after the other after the other. And then we're going to use the same, we're just making it faster here. So I just wanted you to see that. But the key thing is up here. There's a couple things I wanted to show you. The Z index is putting it on top. Here's another little trick. The color, we're using the RGB A. And that A stands for alpha, which allows you to control the opacity. So it's kind of like a whitish text. If this was 255, it would be full white. So it's like a light gray or light kind of not fully white. And then here, this goes between 0 and 1. And I'm putting it at a 0.3 opacity to get this look that we're seeing here. Okay, and that's providing that little bit of see-through element of the text. Okay, so that's a couple of different ways of writing text into a browser, one on top of the video, the other two, one at random, and the others with sequencing it straight through using the array. Hope that's helpful. Email me if you have any questions.